Hey everyone, welcome in. This is a new Celtics beat, and in a way, Adam Kaufman and Valenti, hi, we're here with you as usual. This is like a fan back-to-back edition, I suppose, because we had our buddy Seth Landman last week, and now we welcome back our good friend. He's on with us once a month or so, Dan Greenberg, Barstool Sports, who is certainly the voice of the Celtics fan on social media and probably in written form. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, and maybe we do it next week. This is typically when we'd mix in a journalist or you know, I don't know, one of the TV guys or play-by-play guys or something like that, looking ahead to the off season and what's to come. But I feel like there's still a little bit of a place for us to. I've got a blazer on, guys. I feel like I'm going to the Celtics funeral. It's sad the way we're all feeling right now. We're down in the dumps about the fact that we're watching freaking New York and Indiana at this stage when Boston should still be there, where it's OKC and Minnesota on the other side of the bracket. We should be getting Indy's playing out of its mind, but we should be getting that Boston OKC final that we've been talking for months about. And instead, it's all who are they going to trade and who's this new owner that's come in, minority partner with Bill Chisholm and contributing $1 billion of his own money, and how does he fit into all of this? This is the stuff here upon Memorial Day weekend, Greenie, that we're discussing, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
I mean, it's probably been about as much of a disastrous 2 weeks as you could have if you think of how we were all feeling coming off of that Magic series. In the early part of May, we were like, they made it out mostly unscathed. They got a good matchup. And now here we are 2 weeks later with like literally the worst possible outcome that you could have. Time just does not seem real. Like nothing about this feels normal, like it should be happening. And it's the hard reality of their situation. And it's just so depressing. It's like, what else can you say? It's so depressing.
This show is powered by Prize Picks, by the way, the official daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Go ahead, Ev.
So before we put a bow on this thing, because I know we're going to go in a lot of different directions here.
What are we putting a bow on? We're 5 minutes in.
Well, that's enough. We got that's it.
Hang on. Where'd it go? Where'd my background go? Hey, how about this guy? Wait, no. These guys. Look at this. Remember this? Remember this, Greenie? Remember this guy?
I'm glad you're bringing this up. I'm glad you're bringing this up because I do.
I'm ready.
Oh, these guys.
It hurts.
It hurts. I will say
it hurts so much.
I'm glad you brought that up, kinda, because it's actually going to segue into my thought.
It was not purposeful.
I really enjoyed being the champs for 365 days. Boy,
it was so much better than I dreamed it would be. It was like it was so unbelievable.
That was the best. That was so great. Like I know we're going to get into minutia of like cap,
but you get just wait because I wasn't planning to go here either. But let's have this conversation. You guys aren't children. Like you were certainly old enough to enjoy in a very similar way to now 08, it wasn't, you weren't 12 years old. So
yeah, but this one was different. This one felt different for me.
But why? And I mean, I get it. It felt different for me too. And I can give my reasons, but I want to start with you. Why? What about this past year of the Celtics being champs? Not that they were champs for a full year, but you know what I mean. What felt different versus after they won in 08?
I just think 08 was so instant and they didn't have the previous I mean, they won it year one right away.
Right.
This group, it's your core pieces are homegrown, right? Your two best players. They were supposed to be the franchise saviors. Like Paul Pierce was always going to be a legendary Celtic, even if he never won that title. This title solidified your two franchise saviors. You go through the previous failures and shortcomings of their rise, and it's like you had the pain. So now to like have gone through that and to reach the top of the mountain was different than being like, holy shit, they made 2 trades and instantly you won 66 games and won the title. Like it was like, Pierce was obviously a homegrown part of that, and the path to build that required moving homegrown talent. But this one just felt different for the fact that we had seen it from its inception. We had gone through the pain of losing with it. They lost in the finals with it. So it's like you were almost so close This was like you broke through and could finally just collectively exhale for the rest of their entire careers. We never have to worry about either of their franchise players. And that's a pretty cool feeling.
I think it starts earlier. I think it starts after the trade, and you have these really lean Marcus Smart, Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, Brandon Bass. Like, you have these
Gerald Wallace.
Yeah, the Gerald Wallace pass to Jeff Green in the corner in Miami to beat the Heat in what was the first moment of brilliance of Brad Stevens' career. Like, there is some this was a slow burn to get to banner 18.
And, like half my life.
Right. So it took a long time into crescendo into the two stars that you drafted as a result of the Pierce and Garnett trade. To have that be like the finishing touch, and to have Jaylen win Finals MVP and Tatum to be the first guy to lead a team in points and rebounds, assists, and points, and sixth person ever to do that. It was like really special to have all of that come together. And the bummer of this year is what we thought was this super wide open window is now slammed shut in our face, and now the unknown is really scary, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's like, as I was saying to Greenie before Kaufman even got into the stream here, thank God they got one. Thank God they got that one with this crew, with Al Horford, with the Jays. Like, that's super important to me because of what Al has meant to this franchise, and obviously the two Jays being iconic Celtics, now stamped in the history of Celtics, of the lore of being a Boston Celtic is the best.
So the worst thing they could ever say about this team is they only won one. I'm still gonna die happy. Like, it hasn't.
And that's what everyone says about the new Big Three era. It's people in the revisionist history sense, and obviously the KG injury, the Perk injury, all that. Like, people look back on that era. And I mean, even then, even immediately after it, when Ray left and you still had Paul and KG, people still looked at that tenure as what could have been. Man, it's not a failure, although I did hear somebody call it a failure the other day and it blew my mind. But it's not a failure, but it's disappointing. It's like they left something on the table. And that part of it is fair. I think Garnett and Pierce would tell you they left something on the table. They were up 3-2 in the NBA Finals against the Lakers and obviously couldn't get over the hump. But it just further proves that a lot of things need to go right. Luck, path, health, whatever, to win a championship for any team, obviously. And I hope people out there watching and listening are aware of that. Everything that you guys just brought up about this group is 100% true. But the thing that is most special to me, the thing that in some ways puts this one over 08 for me, and 08, I was a season ticket holder. Oh God, I couldn't have been more excited. Like, growing up on Pierce and dreaming of a guy like Garnett being a Celtic. Like, I mean, that place is a top 5. That team is a top 5 championship in the Boston sports history of my lifetime, for sure. But the thing that might put this one ahead of it is validation. Evan and I have been doing this show since 08. Okay. Or since 18. We've been doing this, if only. We've been doing this show since 18. Is February 18 is when we started doing this show. Obviously, it pre-existed, to us. But we started doing this show, and I don't know how many hours of our lives have been spent with each other, with guests, having the can Tatum and Brown win together conversation. And we have guest after guest, even Cedric Maxwell years ago came on this show and said, got to trade one of those guys. You got an opportunity to go get Anthony Davis. You got to trade one of those guys. And I will say, like, loyal listeners of this show know this. Never one time through all the ups and downs, whether it was health related, the injuries, like obviously Hayward, Irving, Kemba, whoever, like, never one time did I say, yeah, man, I'm not sure they can coexist. I think you got to trade one of those guys. I was always in the camp, like Marcus Smart till I die, right? I was always in the camp that the Jays could get over the hump. The Jays could win a championship together. And so the fact that they finally did and that it looked the way it looked, that it was so freaking easy
Dominant.
last year.
I mean, it was one of the greatest teams in NBA history.
Dominant.
Yeah.
That to me was so, I'll use the word again, it was so incredibly validating that to me is the thing that made last year's championship so special. Never mind the homegrown stars and where they came from and the pieces it took to get there and what Ainge did to what Brad did to what Joe did to even the value of the Ime year, all of it. To me, it was those two guys. It was those two guys who are, going to be up 7-0. They're going to be up in the rafters one day. Obviously, they're, part of Celtics history in a way that, in terms of stardom that few are. And that to me is the thing that I am not ready to overlook and will never overlook.
No.
That plenty of people are already.
Yeah, it's one of those things where our wildest dreams for both guys came true. The players they turned into, the success, because I think the difference in the 08 team is their finals loss came after their first title, so that felt more like they let one slip. I don't really feel that way. That the Celtics, I guess they were up 2-1 and we're up with like 4 minutes left in game 4 or whatever again before Steph went crazy.
That should have been 3-1.
Right, but at the same time, it's like Tatum was 23. Like they were on a normal trajectory progression. Like it wasn't,
Right.
I know they may have been the favorite odds or whatever, but it's still the Steph Curry Dynasty Warriors is a pretty formidable finals opponent. And then the way that they came back in their next appearance and essentially swept it, they definitely lost game 4 on purpose. So it's like, I don't feel contending for titles is hard. So I don't feel like the Celtics of this era, you can say right now, like what rings have they left on the table? It's hard to say. Like in 23, were they going to beat Jokic? Maybe, maybe not. This year, are they going to beat OKC, who's having just as much of a historic season and dominant season as you? Like, who's to say? So it's just like, it's disappointment, but it's a different type of disappointment to where it felt like that 08 trio left one on the table because they were up in a game 7 and like you just had to rebound and you won a second, championship. So a little bit different when you compare the two.
When you think about the time that we're in as like basketball fans, watchers, viewers, whatever you would call us, you have now a 7th straight year where a new team's going to win the NBA championship, no matter who it is. And you can easily talk yourself into next year. Like I'm already having conversations with friends of like, okay, who's OKC next year, right? Because you had the Celtics, you had the Nuggets, C's, Thunder. Some team is going to make some move to vault themselves into the stratosphere of the upper echelon super contenders. Of this year, there were, I would call it 3 between Cleveland, OKC, and Boston. Last year,
what if the Spurs trade for Giannis?
Yeah.
Right. So, like,
there's so much. Yeah. I mean, there's so much you just don't know.
What team does that to become the new entry into the title favorite zone that becomes, this legendary team that goes on a run? And, OKC, they won last year. They get banged up next year. Like it just feels like this era of basketball of as a new champion every year, but to be the one team that's hung around for so long, when we get done with this era of basketball is going to mean something. Like the Celtics, I know that they lost in the semifinals this year, and obviously next year is going to be kind of a wait and see sort of thing, but they've been in contention in the Eastern Conference Finals basically every year Jaylen Brown has walked the earth.
The entire decade, essentially.
So, like you're going to look back and say, yeah, there was a bunch of single standalone winners at the time, but this particular group of C's was in, you have Golden State hanging around a lot. Not many other teams can say that, right? You have Philly's been, right? New York. Denver has had a lot of first round flameouts. That was their problem back before they won the title was, can Jokic really break through? Now Cleveland's going to have this weird thing going on. I just feel like Boston, by getting one and being in the Eastern Conference Finals so many years, you're going to look back and be like, wow, that was probably, a pretty special run that unfortunately only ended in maybe 1 or 2 titles,
Right. And I just think, it'd be one thing if they lost in the second round and their best player didn't have a ruptured Achilles. I think that's what sort of
their
separate.
second best player was playing on one knee, and the third best player was.
But I'm just saying, like, moving forward.
I don't want to get into the whole making excuses thing, though.
No,
like they blew it against the Knicks. They blew it.
100%. I'm saying the perception of this era feels differently if you're coming off a season like this. Think of the disappointment after the Game 7 loss against Miami, right? That was horrendous for the team, the franchise, everything. But at the end of the day, you had a healthy Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, so you knew that
you'd be back
as long as they were going to be available in this era, you were going to be in that contention spot.
Yep.
Now you deal with the reality of losing, but with the certainty that now your best player is out for a year, and you don't know what that player looks like for the rest of this era. So that's what sort of makes it such a heavy matzo ball, is like not just the uncertainty of the contention, but the entire foundation of this whole plan is now no longer a certainty for a guy who you never had to worry about Jason Tatum's progression or how he ages or how his game developed. That was never a concern for anybody. And now it's arguably the biggest issue for the whole direction of their franchise. That's what I mean. It's like the worst possible 2 weeks you could have, we have now experienced.
For those of you out there listening to the show, we ask that you subscribe to the Celtics Beat podcast, like and leave a review. If you are watching on the CLNS YouTube page, by all means, like it, subscribe. Celtics All Access, obviously. Worlds of content, not just this podcast, other podcasts, Locker Room Podium Sound, all of our great reporters, you name it, it's there for you. Please make sure to turn on your notifications so that you know the instant a new video drops. All right, guys, I think that's a good enough segue in terms of looking toward the future, because there are a lot of people, I've heard this a little bit on local radio lately. It's like, why are we doing so much looking ahead, or are we not properly crapping on the Celtics enough for losing to the Knicks, a team that they certainly should have beaten? And I don't feel like living that way. I don't disagree with the sentiment that they blew it. Again, if they don't blow 20-point lead after 20-point lead in games 1 and 2, there's an alternate universe, Greenie, where like you win those first 2 games, maybe Jason Tatum never even gets hurt. And, now you're obviously playing against Indiana and you've got yourself a pretty entertaining series, because I maintain that New York, despite being where it is in the postseason, part of the Final Four, I don't think it's a very good team. I don't think the Timberwolves are a very good team either. That's why I feel like we're on this OKC Indiana collision course to the NBA Finals. But in the spirit of looking ahead, let's get to the shit. And I'm looking down at my phone for a reason. Ev and I were on our thread earlier with our buddy Seth, who was on last week, and he sent a text earlier today that, Greenie, like you get into this stuff a little bit. I mean, in all honesty, like Keith Smith is probably the perfect guest for this stuff to get into.
He's
all the salary cap,
God.
Tax ramifications, all that stuff. 3 of us aren't really capable of fully getting into the weeds with that, so we'll get Keith on here soon. But Seth texts this: important to note when thinking about the C's future that it's not just getting out of the second or even the first apron that's important in the long term. If they're going to take a step back, it makes sense entirely to get out of the tax for at least some amount of time to reset the repeater tax clock. You're going to have to deduct the tax twice in the next 4 seasons. At least that's my understanding. So I would try like hell to hold on to White. But the more I read and think about it, the more it seems like Brown is definitely gone. And if that's your headline for the show, by the way, is Jaylen Brown definitely traded this offseason? Now, going on with the text, if Brown gets the value that people think he is worth, especially if you can pull back enough assets to be able to attach something to Drew and to KP, I think you need to do it. So I reply to him, Brown is definitely gone is a wild sentence. And he says, I just don't know how you justify holding on to him. If you can find a way to move off of KP and Drew and save all the money that you need to save, I guess you can hold on to both Brown and White, but I just don't see it. So let's go there, Greenie, because look, this is going to be the focal point of a lot of the stuff that you're going to get into on shows that you appear on and articles that you're going to write for Barstool. Are we living in a universe, regardless of whether or not you're ready to accept it? Do you think Jaylen Brown has played his last game in a Celtics uniform?
No. I think it's important to remember Jason Tatum did not die, he is returning. And I think it's important that when he does return, you're bringing him into a team that is ready to go and ready to, pick up right where they left off when he got hurt, because if not, do I now have to worry about his potential future and his desire to remain a Celtic? So I think we know that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum work as the core and foundation of this team. While I don't think you can say, Brad Stevens would never, because, he's shown that he'll do, some pretty remarkable things. I just think I don't see the benefit of getting under the tax I guess it comes down to the owner saying the only thing we need to get out of is the restrictions of how we can build our team, not a monetary tax bill situation. Like, you can't buy this version of this era of the Boston Celtics and be like, I'm not interested in being a luxury tax team. And I think you do that with or without Jason Tatum. What matters, I think, is getting out of the second apron, unlocking the team building. You can, the team building assets, the exemptions, the mid-level that you can now use if you get under the second apron, unfreeze your picks, do that stuff so you can then build the team so that when Tatum comes back, you can then go back over the apron, just like you did, in this current version. So I would be very, very surprised because, it's sort of like the old Family Guy sketch where it's like, do you want a boat or do you want the mystery box? And he's like, give me the mystery box because it could even be a boat. Like, if you're going to move Jaylen Brown that you hope turns into Jaylen Brown in 3 or 4 years, how does that help you once Tatum comes back? If you're going to say no White, no Brown, I can understand moving off contracts to get under the apron, but you shouldn't have to attach anything to Porzingis. He's an expiring contract. Someone will take that just for the cap space that he's going to provide. So I don't know. I think that's one end of the spectrum, but I think that's maybe a little bit too deep off the deep end for me.
Yeah, I just can't fathom. Like, I get the idea of it, and I agree with you have to take the phone call if somebody blows you away, and you have to really think about it. But that being said, what I just watched in games 5 and 6 with Jaylen Brown is exactly why I can't trade the guy. I watched him in game 5 against the Knicks step up and be the best Jaylen Brown maybe we've ever seen. He was non-finals edition for sure. He was excellent, like 28, 12, and I don't even know how many rebounds. I know he had 12 assists. And he was playing great defense that night. And then in game 6, he's the only guy to me that showed up in the game. Like, I just watching it, I kept was like, is anybody gonna join Jaylen at all in this game? Like, somebody please, because he clearly wants to win this game. And I know he fouled out, but like, I would rather him foul out of that game and just be like, hey, I left it all out there. Like, I don't care. And the guy was on one knee, as we found out later on, thanks to Ramona Shelburne, that he has this partially torn meniscus that he'd been playing with for months. Like, I don't trade guys like that. And we don't know what this new ownership group's going to do. Like, we just heard today, this is Friday night, this will release Saturday. But we had the news that some steel, precious metals magnate just invested $1 billion into the franchise. Like, I don't know. I feel like these guys are going to be interested in keeping the Celtics history sorted together here, keeping them in contention while they still have it. And as Greenie said, while you have Jason Tatum on the team, like, you owe it to him to keep contending for titles.
Because again, we don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back. Maybe it's a version of Tatum where this roster needs more of a Jaylen Brown contribution coming off his, solo 1A season. Maybe to ease Tatum back into it, they try to take things off of his load, which is why you're going to want to have. I just think the uncertainty around the Achilles changes you from doing something as drastic as that, because you need to, you'll need a franchise player one way or another. That Jaylen Brown can fill that role. He may not do it as well as Jason Tatum, but that's the reality that we're in until we know what Tatum looks like once he's back.
Want to take a quick break, tell you about our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. 2K! My goodness. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks.
Talk about flex play all the time. It is my saving grace. It's why I love Prize Picks. It's what keeps me coming back, because you only hit 2 out of 3 to win money. It's the best. There's nobody else offering this. Kaufman, I went on a heater at the end of the regular season just thanks to flex play. It was the most fun I've had doing daily fantasy in my life. And with that in mind, again, you only have to hit 2 out of 3. You can even double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. With that in mind, we're going to look at the flex play for what will be a fun Saturday night, or at least I should say Game 3 between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm taking Chet less than 26.5 points, rebounds, and assists combined. Rudy Gobert, I'm going to go more than 9 rebounds. He hasn't done it yet against Oklahoma City. I feel like going home, he'll be able to just do better on that end. He is one of the best rebounders in the league. I hope he bounces back so I can win some money. I won't lie. And then Casey Wallace, I'm going more than 1.5 rebounds. Guys just got to get 2 rebounds. That's it. And he's done it basically 3 out of the past 5 games, at both games against the Timberwolves. So I like that. Again, the flex play, if you hit 2, you get 1.25x of your cash. If you hit all 3, that's 2.5 times what you wager. So I'm telling you right now, flex play is the best. And Kaufman, getting your money could not be literally any easier than Prize Pick.
Chet had a big boy game in that last game. He'd worry me a little bit. Seems like he's figuring something out. But like you said, the money, if you win, couldn't be any easier to get your returns. In as little as 15 minutes, you just watch it roll into your account. Prize Picks, it even uses Venmo. There is literally nothing easier than that. Download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the Prize Picks app. Do it right now. Use code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after playing your first lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we're back here with Greenie. And so talking about the expectations for Jaylen Brown, what that offseason is going to look like. It starts with this, and I think most would agree with it. I do trust in Brad Stevens, even if he moves him, and I hope he doesn't. I hope Jaylen remains. But I do trust in Brad, because honestly, in the time that he has been the POBO, the president of basketball operations, I mean, truly, like, you can't fill one hand with bad moves that he has made, be it a trade, a signing, draft pick. Like, it's.
Well, we'll see about the draft. I don't know if we're ready to crown him as a drafter just yet.
Oh, no, but I'm just saying, like, even if you hate all of his draft picks so far, it still doesn't fill one hand. You know, that's what I mean. Like, he hasn't been at it that long. He's made a ton of moves, and most, have at the very least been net positive versus those that have been runaway favorites. One of the runaway favorites, obviously, was the acquisition of Derek White. And I'll say this: I want them to keep both. I don't sit here convinced that one has to be gone. I do think that Drew is gone. I think that KP is live to leave. I think that Al could very well retire if they don't give him the kind of money he's looking for. I don't think he wants to go play somewhere else. I think it's Boston or bust. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Hauser could move, certainly, based upon what his salary does to the tax and all of that. But if you're ranking untouchables, the grand package of it, and obviously Jason Tatum's not getting moved, so that's your number one with a bullet. But after that, nobody's untouchable. Like, anyone could be moved, but if you're saying, like, who's the closest, I think Derek White is actually closer to being untouchable than Jaylen is, for all of the different things that he brings on the floor, coupled with the fact that contract is an absolute steal. You can sit here and say Jaylen is fairly paid. Some might say he's overpaid, but even if you want to say he's fairly paid, he's not underpaid. Derek White is underpaid.
I think your return for White, though, would be bigger than Jaylen's, just health-wise, value contract-wise, skill set. So I don't know if he's more untouchable. I think if Brad is given the choice of trading the two, I do not think he would trade Jaylen over him. I don't. He's younger. I don't know. Wings are still king in the NBA. You know, there is another Derek White somewhere on this planet. I think he may not be born yet. I don't know, but like I don't know. I just think if you're trading either one of these guys for who's going to bring back the most value, then I think Derek White brings you back more than Jaylen does moving forward. Because teams maybe don't want to pay that deal. Maybe they're nervous about him aging out. You know, Derek doesn't really play towards contact, so he has to project probably as a better health risk and longevity play between the two players. And he's sort of a plug and play, can play any style, any role. You know, that's not always true with Jaylen. So I think their value is insurmountable for this roster. I think, you know, you're moving everybody on the roster before those three. But I can't see it. If you want to have a team that can contend when Tatum is back, you need, Derek White and Jaylen Brown to do that, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree with the fact that I think more teams would call for Derek White than Jaylen, only because I think, as Greenie said, Derek White's a guy you can plop on a team and just he's going to figure it out. Like, I keep thinking of Houston. Like, if Houston strikes out on KD and Giannis, does Houston come calling? I don't know if they come calling for Jaylen Brown, because I think they really want to feature Amen Thompson. I think they want to see what that's about. But if they came calling for Derek White and threw you a bunch of picks, because they have a ton of picks that aren't their own that are very advantageous. They have Tari Eason. You know, I don't know if they want to throw Şengün into something like that. I'm not a huge Jalen Green guy, but if it,
you got to pay him, right? Or isn't he up for an extension, or he just signed one?
But there's some like, you know, Jabari Smith I like a lot. I think he's getting overshadowed there because there's so much young talent on that team. You could convince me of a trade package with Houston I would see it. It's just hard to trade but the problem is this team is so up against it. And again, we'll see how this offseason kind of shakes out. Again, all trust in Brad, no joke. Like, the guy has been the Kemba Walker for Al Horford deal that everybody was like, what's going on here? Well, it is absolutely brilliant and was the best move they did besides the Derek White trade, where they gave up Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, and like a pick swap and a first round pick. But an absolute joke. But at the same time, like, he knows better than anybody how to build around the Jays.
Right.
Both of them. And I keep going back to it's so good that they have Brad in charge because he knows exactly what those two guys need. And yes, replacing Derek White seems impossible, but it's definitely more possible than trying to find another Jaylen Brown.
Right.
And I know people get mad at the way the Jays play, but at the same time, they've had a ton of success doing it. And as we've learned, floor spacing is really the key to what the Celtics want to do. And yeah, you're not going to find anybody as good as Derek White, but you'll find guys that can, like, I see Walter Clayton Jr., the kid from Florida, mocked to the late first round all the time. I'm going to tell you right now, if the Celtics get their hands on that guy from Florida, who was the best shooter in the NCAA tournament, like, put him on a team with the Jays. Like, I can think of the same thing about Baylor Shireman playing with Jason Tatum. Baylor Shireman has not seen shots that open ever in his life. So you put another guy on the floor, like, Green, you'll back me up on this. You look at the on-off data more than I do. Jason Tatum plus 4 dudes is probably going to end you in a net positive.
Right. And I think, again, you don't need to trade Derek White to get under. If it just comes down to stuff we don't know. Is the mandate get out of the second apron or get out of the luxury tax, right? I can't imagine a team this good and this close to contention would say you need to not be a luxury tax team. So if it's just to get under the second apron, offload KP's $30 million, offload Drew's $35 million, trade Sam Hauser to the Spurs in their mid-level exemption and get your pick swap back. You know, like, there are ways, I feel like, to get under the apron and keep your nucleus 3 of White, Brown, and Tatum. And then, you know, whatever you get back in this gap year, you figure it out and you have a year with no expectations. And then you're still set up in a good spot to now you've gotten under the apron. So, you're allowed to go back over because it would be your third time in 5 years. You're still in that safe zone. I just feel like that's a much better path than saying, okay, let's just maximize on, this Derek White chip that breaks up a trio we know can win a title for picks and young guys to maybe turn into Derek White one day. It does not, you are entering the prime of your franchise superstars. This is not like when the Celtics were in the bubble and the Jays were 23 and 25. They're 28 and 27. So now is your win now move part of your era. Whereas, that's why they doubled down and invested so heavily in all these extensions and this exact roster, because they said, okay, this is our window, whatever it is. And then when we offload our aging players, we'll be able to reload. Now you're just doing the reloading part without Tatum in the lineup, but the plan has to stay the same because you would be reloading the same way with KP's expiring and Drew's aging deal. If Tatum was healthy, but you lost in the second round, you would make the same moves you could make this summer, but Tatum is injured. So I don't think the plan should change of who's available, who's not available, just because he might miss a year.
But here's the biggest but of all. All of that happened before we even knew the team was going to be for sale, let alone before it was sold. We knew, or felt at least we knew, after years of experience dissecting it, what to expect from the Grossbeck-led ownership group. We'd like to believe what we're going to get out of Chisholm and company, but we don't know. He's saying and doing all the right things right now, but proof's in the pudding, right? We have no idea what he is willing to do. He bought this team thinking he was coming in and getting a team that may win title after title after title. Now, in the blink of an eye, he has a team that I won't say next year is in a rebuild, but it's certainly in a reconstruction, a reconfiguration of what that roster looks like, with all of these financial considerations, knowing that all of a sudden you don't have a team that enters the year as in just an on paper Vegas considered contender. You have a team that should hopefully be in the playoffs anyway, but is it really going to go on a run? We have no idea. And you also don't know, and this is just the ultimate down the line stuff that we're going to spend the next year plus talking about. We don't know, and we hope and pray, but we don't know if Jason Tatum is going to be the same guy when he comes back. And I don't mean immediately when he comes back. There's going to be an adjustment period, but we don't know if he's ever going to be the same guy again. You hope, based on medical advances and based on, age and previous durability and all of these things, you hope and pray that Kevin Durant is no longer the poster child for this injury. It becomes Jason Tatum in the future. But what if it doesn't? That is the point, greatest unknown of all of this.
Right, but that's my point, is even if this sale didn't happen and Wick still owned the team, once you got into these years, you were going to have to shed salary. So it's even if Chisholm said, even if Wick was like, hey, I'm down to pay whatever, but you just know through the CBA, you can't be a second apron team more than 3 years in a 5-year span, or else things get locked. It's just, Wick talked about it on EEI of it's not the tax portion. It's being a second apron team for 3 out of 5 years. So knowing that they were always going to shed salary, it doesn't really matter. Even if Billy Chisholm is like, hey, no matter what, I'm not playing second, get under the second apron. Tatum is hurt. Okay. Those were realities with or without the sale. I think what you then look forward to is what you were talking about of okay, if we're off-selling pieces to get under the second apron, how do we need to be positioned for when Tatum comes back in the event that he isn't the same? Do you need to have more cap space? Do you need to, you pull off certain trades to bring in certain positions? Are you drafting differently? Those are things I think impact, that reality. But for the short term of making a roster decision of getting under a certain number because we don't know what the new owner is going to want, I would argue that we're going to have to do that even if there wasn't a sale. So just because of the basketball restrictions. So to me, it was we knew what the shelf life was. we've now just entered the years of the shelf life where you have to cut costs and get rid of guys.
It's funny to bring this up just because I think a lot of people spent time dissecting what Boston should do instead of analyzing. And I said this at the time when I was on Barrett's pod and I wanted to do a classic Russillo zag. And I was like, this is actually a good thing for Boston because it makes their offseason way easier because they don't have to think about, the what if, whatever. They just know that Tatum's going to be out. And I think a lot of people haven't spent a lot of time thinking. And I think, Greenie, it's interesting you bring it up of this offseason. Like, Tatum's injury does not change what they were going to do this offseason anyway. Like, they were going to do this unless they won the title, which, again, at that point, it's like all right, well, shit, we got to do it again.
Yeah, like, we're not going to be the one that ruins a
potential. Like, we're just going to run this back because, hey, here we are. Like, this would have taken Porzingis actually playing and all this other stuff. But you can make the argument, like, yeah, okay, well, if they won 2 in a row, let's rock. Let's do it again. Like, who cares? Like, whatever everybody else does, it's secondary to what we do. Now that they lost, whether Tatum was healthy or not, they were going to have to do something like this. I think maybe having Tatum sidelined for as long as he's going to be, and again, the timeline is like, who knows? Could be 9 months, could be 12, could be 15. We don't know. It makes, I think, it a little bit different. You can attack this a little bit differently. I think it might give the Celtics more clarity because it's like, we can spend the entire year looking to see what, Baylor Shireman can give us. And we can take a look and see, what does Peyton Pritchard look like as a lead guard, as the point guard of a starting team, which Kaufman has been talking about ad nauseum for the past couple of weeks. Because, it might come to a point where, Pritchard's going to have to probably run point, from the jump.
He's going to need an Isaiah Thomas 2016 season, basically.
Yeah.
What is now, that's his, role for now.
And what has, I think, was a little eye-opening for me, because I spent a lot of this year being like, is Peyton Pritchard, are we ready for this? I just watched Pritchard get play off the floor in big playoff games. The further the series went, the less he played. And then this year he was just awesome. He was like one of the best defensive players by the end of it. And we're all sitting here thinking, why didn't he play more against the Knicks? So it'll be interesting to see if they get, a little bit more run out of him, what he can do as a lead ball handler. What does Jaylen look like as a number one option on a team? What does Derek White look like as a number 2? What do they do at the big spot, which is going to be a whole.
Well, that's the thing that I think Tatum's injury impacts, not their plan of who they, have to shed salary of, but what they bring back in return in what those trades are, right? With Tatum, maybe you're saying, okay, I'm interested in wing depth. Okay, now without Tatum, you need a rebounder. You're like, okay, maybe now we flip, the players that we get back in a Porzingis trade is a big man instead of a wing. Or for Drew, if it's like we were going to swap it for a guard, but now we need wing depth. So I think that's the only thing that the injury changes is not, okay, we have to unload KP, we have to unload Drew. It's, are we entertaining? Are different teams now in the mix because of positional need and what might be available, knowing that you're not going to have Tatum's rebounding, you're not going to have, perhaps Cornette, Al, and Tatum all gone. How are you rebounding? So it's like, I think that is going to be what we see dictate the plan, not, we weren't going to do anything because we had Tatum healthy. Now he's injured. Now we're, selling off all of our parts.
Guys, in the last little bit of this program, I want to get away from all this stuff because we have a whole offseason to do it every single week. It's going to be amazing. In terms of these playoffs, the Thunder are up 2-0 against the Timberwolves, and I said I was screaming to everyone that the Thunder, like Minnesota, forget it. Like, okay, in 5 was, if you're looking for a correct score, maybe a sweep, maybe, just maybe, I'll respect Ant enough to give him 6, but OKC 5 is where my money would go. And they're up 2-0, won 2 games late going away. Meanwhile, Indiana, the dog coming in, took 2 games at MSG to go up 2-0 on New York. This is another one that I was from the mountaintops. Indiana's going to win this series. Although I did expect a long series, 6-7 games. And it may not be that now. They didn't split in New York. But specifically, Aaron Nesmith, who has been awesome for Indiana, obviously not just in this playoffs, but in general. I mean, he was crucial to that Game 1 win. He chipped in a dozen on only 7 shots in this Game 2 contest. And I'm bringing all of that up to spin this back to a guy that I mentioned earlier. And before that, I'm not sure the last time he's been mentioned on this show at all, Danny Ainge. Let's have a little Danny Ainge appreciation couple of minutes here, because you guys all remember that for years there was all the like Trader Danny stuff, but for years there were a lot of questions around Danny Ainge's ability to draft. A lot of questions around that. Going back, we were talking about this before the show, and you brought up Greenie Fab Mello as a kind of a turning point, let's say.
Because wasn't that like 2012 or 2011?
2012.
Okay, so yeah, that's then I feel like that's the inflection point.
So let's look at that as an inflection point and look at who came after that. And we'll say after that draft, because much as Syracuse guys have, much as I love Chris Joseph. Yeah, let's
ARIS.
2013, you got the one guy, and it's Lucas Nogueira. Nothing obviously came of him in a Boston uniform, as I recall.
Didn't they trade him? Didn't he get traded on?
He went to Dallas and then to Atlanta. Would you believe he actually played 141 NBA games?
No.
That shocks me. But anyway, going from there, this is when Brad took over. Now, not as a drafter, but as head coach. This is where their visions start to sink a little bit, let's say. Marcus Smart, I think anyone will admit that that's a hit. Some will quibble as to whether it was a hit at a number 6 overall pick, but obviously he has played north of 600 games. James Young followed him. That's a miss.
Fallen soldier, my love, my one true love.
Martin Young, baby, we love him.
That's a miss. Terry Rozier, obvious hit. RJ Hunter, that's a miss. That's a first round miss, even at 28. Jordan Mickey, who we were joking about him pre-show, guys. I will still never forget. I was doing the Celtics at 7 show on the Sports Hub, and it was probably after some ridiculous summer league performance. And I had Mike Gorman on the show, and I said to Gorman, Jordan Mickey is going to be an all-star in this league. And even Gorman, who is as pro, like Celtics homer as you'll like, short of Tommy, right? Even Gorman goes, you must be drinking what Tommy's drinking. He was not buying in on Jordan Mickey, and obviously that one did not work out. Nor did Marcus Thornton out of William and Mary. So that takes us to 2016 when the Celtics drafted 1,000 guys. Jaylen Brown, obvious hit. Gershon Yabusele, I think a lot of people viewed as a miss for a while, but he can play now. He can play. Ante Zizic, remarkable miss.
Do you get Kyrie Irving without Ante Zizic?
Yes, you do. Deontay Davis, that's a miss. Just a whole bunch of second rounders that might get like Zagarak. He never came over. Demetrius Jackson didn't play 30 games. Ben Bentel, only 3 games in his NBA career. Abdel Nader
from Providence.
Abdel Nader is a hit for a guy drafted at 58, as far as I'm concerned. He played 200 plus games.
Yeah.
Okay. 2017, Tatum, obviously. Semi Ojeleye, for a second rounder. I mean, 284 games.
No, that's a miss. He was
all right. It's a miss.
He having to play in 200 games.
Yeah, they were kind of forced into playing.
Yeah.
That's fine. If you didn't have a career after the Celtics, you're a miss, and he basically didn't. Kadeem Allen, Jabari Bird. Robert Williams, that's a hit. Despite the injuries, I will call him a hit. And then you have Romeo Langford, who that's not so good at 14. That we're into 2019 now. Matisse Thybulle, that's a hit, even though they traded him away to Philly. Grant Williams, he's a hit. Tremont Waters, obviously not. That takes
Waters could have played if he was taller.
Takes us to 2020. Aaron Nesmith, big hit. Peyton Pritchard, big hit. Desmond Bane, who they immediately traded to Memphis, but still they drafted him. Big hit. Yam Madar, I was
might not even be a real
Madar.
person.
I was
not even be a real person.
Perfect.
Where's he been?
Perfect.
Come on.
Perfect. You know where he is? Hanging out with Begaron out of France, who was taken in 2021.
Not real people, okay? Salary cap circumvention is what they were.
At least we watched Begaron play in like the summer league. I don't think Madar ever made it.
No, I
if
think
you were to YouTube, if you YouTube highlights of Jan Madar, they've all been taken down because he is AI.
Honestly,
2022.
that was like we're getting under the we're circumventing the CBA and just drafting people who do not exist. Like
2022, just one guy, JD Davison, who I think we believe can play. I mean, it remains to be seen at what
could be a 4A player.
TBD. I mean, but again, MVP of the G League. He was taken at 53, like he was practically your NBA equivalent of Mr. Irrelevant.
Right.
And then, from there, Julian Phillips in 2023, who I'd completely forgotten they even drafted. He was traded to Washington to then Chicago. He's played about 120 games in the NBA so far. He was a second rounder. And of course, Baylor Shireman, who I think early on we believe in anyway, followed by Anton Walker out of Gonzaga.
Anton Walker. Don't forget Jordan Walsh too. Jordan Walsh too. TBD.
Jordan Walsh is why isn't he on the list?
Because he wasn't drafted by Danny, and neither was Baylor Shireman.
Yeah, you were doing Brad draft.
You were in the Brad's tenure.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Now the last couple of years are Brad drafts. You're right.
Yeah, so he ended. I
got caught up in the moment of reading the names.
I think the Peyton Pritchard draft was his final, right? Something like that.
I've been saying that Peyton Pritchard was Danny's
you may be right.
That was like his farewell gift. Just didn't have a positional need, but he knew that he just had to get him in the system.
Yeah.
Nailed it too.
That's true.
I mean, definitely nailed
it. So anyway, I think like obviously you're gonna have some misses, like clearly, especially in the second round, but it's a lot of hits.
Let me put it this way. We will be extremely fortunate if Brad Stevens turns out to be the drafter that Danny Ainge proved to be.
When does Danny Ainge go in the rafters? Because it's just like way past due here.
Well, and also like I grazed over this, but it was not, and I mean it's easy to look back now, obviously, and hell, Celtic City will remind you of all of this. Even if Danny did nothing but draft Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum,
it was enough.
It was
smart
Jaylen Brown.
Smart too. Smart was an important pick at that time.
Sure. Jaylen Brown was not an easy choice, and he was not a popular choice, as everybody, most especially Jaylen, remembers. Hell, at the time, I wanted Chris Dunn, not because I wanted Dunn, but because I thought Chicago wanted Dunn, and I wanted Jimmy Butler. So I wanted Dunn to trade for Butler. That's what I wanted with that pick. And then Tatum, let's not forget, they had the number 1 overall pick, who everyone was saying, let's go out and draft, Markelle Fultz. And Danny's like, no, I'm good. In fact, I'm going to trade down to then get the guy that I want at 3. So, I mean, again, those two, incredible.
It's tough because, Brad obviously hasn't had an opportunity to pick, above what, like 20 something, 30 something.
And hopefully he never does.
Right. So it's, his hit miss rate is not going to look as good, right? Obviously, once you get past 17, everything is basically just a crapshoot. So, But at the same time, he needs to start finding guys, Kamara in Portland was a second round pick. There are guys that are, Jalen Wells in Memphis is, a late pick that can play. At some point, he has to hit on guys in the 30s, guys in the 40s, especially if they now have to play in this environment where they have to find cheap talent. And that cheap talent needs to be ready to go because you're in a win now window. So, the pressure is certainly on him to, he's got 2 picks this year. Does he trade and, keep trading down? I think at some point I'd like to see him combine stuff and move up and get a guy that can help you, right now, as opposed to he's taken some pretty young outside of Baylor Shireman, JD Davidson and Jordan Walsh were teenagers, they were not NBA ready prospects. He hasn't really drafted a guy who you could say, okay, this guy's ready to go, day one of an NBA season. At some point, we may be at that point where and I say that because if you remember his end of season press conference, he kept talking about, the timing of the draft and how things will be clearer in the draft. It would not shock me if we see them be aggressive to try to go up a couple spots to get into the late teens or early 20s to draft a guy that, if it's a big that you can like a Ware down in Miami that's in like the 15 to 20 range. Like, is there a big man in this draft that you could do that for? I think he has to show that he can do what Ainge did and deliver in June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the kid Wolf from Michigan that's got everybody's attention right now. The kid big man that can shoot threes. Obviously, there's a need for that with this particular system and how they space guys out. But I don't know what they're going to do. If I were Jordan Walsh, I would just get in the gym and shoot threes until I was good at it. Because there's a lot of talent there, and defensively, I really like some of the stuff that you see, but he's just not a consistent shooter. And as we watch Aaron Nesmith thrive in Indiana, I look at Jordan Walsh and say, man, if they don't develop him right, this might be another one of these examples where he goes somewhere else and flourishes. There's talent there. There's absolute talent there. Shireman is like just plop him on a court next year. I think he's going to be just fine. I can tell you right now, I could see him playing like 2 summer league games and just being like, no, you're good. We're taking you off the court. Because you plot them in the NBA games, and when they ran him out there when Hauser was hurt, he was like unconscious from 3 because he got real like legitimate repetitive run. So they're going to.
That's why I think they're sending Hauser to the Spurs in their non-taxpayer mid-level, and they're going to give you back your pick swap, and it's a thank you for giving us Derek White. Popovich and Stevens are tight. They have a great relationship, and you have Baylor Shireman to fill, those rotation minutes. I think that's what we end up seeing.
Well, remains to be seen. A lot really fits that bill, actually, over the course of these coming months and year and years, for that matter, with this new ownership group. We want to remind you, and Tatum's injury as well. God, it sucks. It all sucks right now. I want to remind you.
Saying it out loud. Please stop saying
maybe we'll just pretend it doesn't exist. Prize Picks, the official daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code CLNS Media. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Make sure you check out Dan Greenberg over on Twitter at Stool Greenie, and he is just really tweeting through his emotions at this point in time.
I watched Game 5. I watched Game 5 probably twice a week of last year. Game 5 to win the title. Just at night in my office, I turn all the lights off. I can't believe this is our reality. But oh well.
I can't remember if I ever. I mean, there had to be a obviously like a celebratory championship DVD that the NBA or that the NBC Sports Boston or somebody put out. I don't remember if I actually saw it.
I think they just put out like the NBA.com put out like an 18 banners series that was like.
That's it?
Yeah, I think that was their official.
Not good enough.
It's not like the 07 box DVD. I think it's just that. I think it's either called like Chasing 18 or something like that. Because it came after the All City or whatever that was that the team put out, and then it was like a 9-part series.
I mean, there are a bunch of books, obviously. Everyone was capitalizing on that and written.
I think Al Horford narrated it.
I didn't watch it, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
back in the good old days. This time last year, where we were like, engulfing in never-ending Celtics porn, it was great. Now it's like the worst ever. So,
well, ebbs and flows. For Dan Greenberg, for Evan Valenti, I'm Adam Kaufman. Everybody enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Do enjoy the playoff basketball. I know it sort of makes you want to turn away with the Celtics not involved, but we have gotten some really good games, and hopefully those will continue on into the NBA Finals over the course of the next few weeks. But as for Celtics Beat, we'll catch you again next week.